If I were to feel bad for one NBA franchise, it is for sure the Chicago Bulls. Out of all the 30 NBA teams, the Chicago Bulls seem to have the least direction of any team. They sit right now at 15-20 when I'm recording this video, and in 10th place in the East, which is the final play-in spot. But even if they make the play-in tournament, there's a very little chance that they even make the actual playoffs, and an even slimmer chance that they make any noise if they get there. They've been awful the past couple seasons, but unlike most teams in this situation, the Bulls have very little hope for their future. Their core is aging and they have little young talent to build around going forward. Their average age is 26.2 and in the top half of the league, with their core of DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Andre Drummond getting up there in age. DeMar is 34 years old, Vooch is 33, and LaVine is almost 29, and you can't build around these three guys, but their contracts are so large that it's extremely difficult to offload them on someone else, and it's hard to tell how much young talent or draft capital these three will even get for the Chicago Bulls. Another wrinkle that the Bulls have to deal with is the future of Lonzo Ball. In January of 2021, Lonzo had the Bulls at the top of the Eastern Conference, and they looked like a great team, with Lonzo leading the fast break and DeMar and LaVine capitalizing on having a great point guard. Even Alex Caruso back then was doing crazy things with Lonzo as his point guard. But obviously this core has done well together before. But we don't have a timeline for Alonso's return. It's speculated that he can walk without pain and will start running again soon, but when will he actually start playing basketball, and what if there's another setback? You can't base your future around a guy that hasn't played basketball in 3 years. I love Lonzo and I think he's a great fit for this team, but there is so much uncertainty that you can't make any decisions around his availability going forward. And with how many knee injuries he's dealt with throughout his career, and then he had the ankle issues at UCLA, it's hard to even determine if he will be the same player when he comes back, because he hasn't played a game of competitive basketball in 3 years here coming up later on in January. And when you've been out of the game for that long, it's hard to make a full comeback, and it's hard to become the player that you once were, even if you have the full usage of his knee and if you have your full athletic capabilities. But it's very unlikely that he will even be the same athletic, explosive player that he was before the injuries piled up for him. In terms of young talent, Coby White has looked decent this year statistically, averaging 17.6 points and 4.7 assists per game, but he isn't really a guy that the Bulls are looking to build around long term, and Patrick Williams hasn't developed into the player the Bulls thought that he'd become when they drafted him 4th overall in 2020. Outside of these two, the Bulls don't have anyone to build the future around, and they need to figure out a way to trade some of their aging superstars to get draft picks and young players to at least have something to look forward to for their future. Another big question for the Bulls is, what can your superstars fetch you in a trade? DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine's trade value has plummeted the past 2 years since they've been so horrible, and you're looking at a point where Zach LaVine may only grab you 1 first-round pick or a second-round pick and a young player, and the same is true for DeMar DeRozan, and it's hard to think that Zach LaVine is going to catch you much more than 2 first-round picks or a first-round pick and a young player, because when teams are looking at the Bulls right now, they're looking at them as a dumpster fire and desperate to offload their talent to get more young players and picks for the future. So the other team has leverage right now over the Bulls because they know that the Bulls are desperate and they have no clear direction. And that's why it's hard to see where the Bulls even go from here, because if you look at their young talent in-house, they haven't been able to develop talent. They haven't been able to draft well, going back to Patrick Williams in 2020. And you don't have any leverage over your superstars. Your stars that you're paying all this money are not giving you what you thought that they would give you. You have Lonzo Ball, who's been out of the lineup for the past 3 years, and you just don't have a direction. The Bulls are the most directionless team I've seen in probably almost my entire time watching the NBA, which has lasted the last 12 or so years. And you don't have any solid picks from the past couple of years to build around. You don't have any shot of contending, it seems, going forwards this season or for the short-term future. And you also don't have trade leverage for any of your stars to get value for the future as well. So if you look at the Bulls, this is a very sad situation, and it's hard to even decipher what they should do going forward. the Bulls didn't even have a first round pick in 2023, and they haven't had a first round pick 2 of the past 3 years, in 2021 and 2023, and the only first round pick that they've actually drafted was in 2022, and that was the 18th pick, Dalen Terry, out of Arizona, who hasn't really turned out to be much of anything for them, and is shooting 42% from the field and 21% from three for them in 57 games. And this team just hasn't had draft picks, they haven't had young players, and they haven't had success with the players that they traded so much for in the past 3 or 4 years. This team is impossible to watch, they're boring to watch, and they don't have a future, and they don't have a direction for their future. This team, I feel terrible for their fans, because this team just has no direction, and they have no real hope of anything unless they can absolutely fleece a team in a Zach LaVine trade or in a DeMar DeRozan trade. And if you can possibly get something out of Nikola Vucevic after he's taken such a decline in the past couple of seasons, that would be amazing for the Bulls, but highly unlikely. And to see the downfall of the Bulls is crazy, because only a few years ago they had actually a decent future. They thought that Patrick Williams would develop into something. You had Kobe White developing, and you had them at the top of the Eastern Conference with DeMar, with Zach LaVine, and a healthy Lonzo Ball. And even Alex Caruso was playing solid basketball back then, to where you thought that they had a solid future and a solid present, but now it looks like they have neither of the two, and they can't even win games enough to be relevant. And normally when you have a bad team, at least you can make it fun. If you look at the Spurs, at least they have Wembanyama to make games interesting and sell tickets and get seats filled in the stadium. But with the Bulls, they play a boring brand of basketball, they're awful, and they have no one to get excited about for the future. It makes for fans to get very discouraged, and not a lot of people to want to go to Bulls basketball games. And while I am a Raptors fan, I feel terribly for Chicago Bulls fans, because I just don't see where they go from here. Hopefully you can trade Zach LaVine. There's been trade rumors going on for the last 3 years, it seems like, surrounding him, and we all know that DeMar would love to go back to Los Angeles to play for the Lakers or Clippers, because that's kind of his home. But we'll have to see how it all unfolds. Let me know what you think in the comments below. God bless you all. I hope you have an amazing day. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, because I am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by April. God bless.